Hello everyone! This guide focuses on the skill module in Miliastra Wonderland. You will learn what skills are and how to create and configure custom skills for characters using the animation editor and client node graphs. Additionally, I will show you 4 examples of custom skills I prepared for this video. A dash skill, a meteor shower skill, a tri-elemental tornado skill, and a protective shield skill. Skills are special abilities that let your character perform preset actions in response to player input during gameplay. In classic mode, character abilities like normal attack, elemental skill, and elemental burst are all considered skills. You can access the skill tab by going into combat preset and selecting the third option from the top. Then add a custom skill by clicking plus new skill. Each skill has its own skill parameters divided into basic settings, numerical configuration, and life cycle management. Each skill also has a configuration ID and type. Starting from the top, configuration ID is the unique identifier of the skill. It can be referenced in node graphs. Skill type defaults to normal skill, but you can change it to instant skill, which triggers immediately upon input, hold skill, which allows players to enter the looping animation by holding down the corresponding input, combo skill, which can be configured as a series of consecutive actions or combos, and aiming skill, which allows to put the player into an aiming state when casting the skill. Enable fall protection prevents the character from falling off cliffs during displacement skills. Allow casting midair lets players use the skill while jumping, falling, or gliding. If you want your skill to have any cooldown, you need to enable with cooldown option and set your desired cooldown time measured in seconds. Usage limit sets how many times the skill can be used. Leave it disabled for unlimited uses. If you want your skill to have any resource cost, first you need to create a skill resource by going into Skill Resource Management and clicking on New Skill Resource. Then you need to enable resource consumption and select your newly created consumption type. Otherwise, the skill will be free to cast. Targeting range defines the skill's target detection area. You can choose either cylinder or sector. Sector adds angle and rotation options. In lifecycle management, enabling destroy the skill when reaching the usage limit will cause the skill to be removed after a set amount of uses. Combo skills and aiming skills have additional settings. In combo settings, you can enable charging branch, which lets you transition from combos to charge animations. Charging global pre-movement makes combo and charge animations share the same pre-movement setup. In aiming settings, you can select either hold or toggle in aiming state activation. Hold means that the player needs to click and hold the skill to enter the aiming mode and release to exit. Toggle means that the player needs to tap the skill to enter the aiming mode and click again to exit. Movement while aiming should be pretty self-explanatory. It enables or disables character movement while in the aiming state. Lastly, aim and fire animation duration means that after switching to the custom mode, you can modify the duration of the aiming skill's firing animation. That's it for the skill parameters. I will explain skill animations, client node graphs, skill slots, and adding skills from my 4 examples I prepared for this video. So let's start with the first one, creating a dash skill. My first example is a simple dash skill that lets players quickly move forward in the direction they're facing, even while airborne. It's useful for parkour or combat stages. Start by going to Combat Preset, Skill tab, and click plus new skill. I explained all the settings on this page, so feel free to adjust cooldown, usage limit and resource consumption to fit your needs. Make sure Allow Casting Meter is enabled. Copy the configuration ID of your new skill. For the first time in this guide, open Miliastra Sandbox Editor. Every node graph in this guide will be a client node graph, so go to Window, Client Node Graph Resource Explorer, and create your graphs under Character Skill Node Graph. Right-click in empty space and select Create Node Graph. When you create your first client node graph, you'll notice the Node Graph Starts event node is already placed. It's the only available event node here. That's because this node graph gets inserted into an animation, unlike server node graphs that mount directly to players or entities. To make a dash skill, we can use the execution node Fixed Point Displacement with set displacement duration, attenuation duration, and speed. I chose 0.55, 0 and 15 respectively. You can also choose whether to stop the dash on collision. The trickier part is setting the dash target. We always want to dash in the direction the character faces, so combine 3D vector rotation with 3D vector addition. The create 3D vector nodes, x, y, and z values control the dash direction relative to the character's facing direction. In my example, I want my dash to displace my character 10 meters forward in the direction my character is facing, and z is the forward axis here. Hence my 3D vector has coordinates 0, 0, 10. If you wanted your dash to displace your character upward, you would instead modify the y value, for example 0, 10, 0. And if you wanted your character to dash at an angle, you would modify more than one value, for example 0, 10, 10. After you're done, save your node graph and let's head to Animation Editor. As previously mentioned, in order for your skill to work, it must be inserted into an animation. For this skill I chose the Sword Normal Attack 01 animation and shortened it to 0.8 seconds by clicking on the animation duration. Use the blue flag to find the most fitting place in your timeline to insert your node graph, then right-click on the node graph event track, click Add Event, and then select your newly created node graph. You can also add VFX using the status track to make it more visually appealing. I used Ruin Drake Skywatch Weekend State Loop VFX for this example. After you're done, save your skill and head to Player tab and Class. If you plan to add various different classes to your stage with different skills, you will need to click on Create Class here. Otherwise, use the default custom class. Head into the second tab on the right and under Active Skill, select at least one to assign your dash skill. My second example is a Meteor Shower skill. You can hold the input button for up to 10 seconds to summon meteors falling from the sky. Releasing the input button early will cancel the skill. To start, first create a local projectile for the meteor by going into Combat preset, Local Projectile, and clicking plus New Projectile. Select Empty Object in Basic Settings, disable Native Collision, and enable Permanent in Life Cycle settings. Optionally, set X, Z, and Y axis destruction distance to 50. This makes projectiles vanish after traveling that distance. In the second tab, we need to add some VFX, since currently our projectile is invisible. I chose 3 VFX. Pyro Whopper Flower Exploding Fireball with zoom factor of 2, Geo Arrow Shot with zoom factor of 2, and Geo Elemental Energy Orb. Feel free to experiment with your own ideas, and after you're done, click Advanced Editing in Projectile Motion device. Set projectile type to linear projectile. If you want your meteor to fall at a slight angle, you can set your initial speed to y-axis -10 and x-axis 3. You could also use the z-axis instead. Before configuring on-hit detection, go to the third tab and add an ability unit. Set ability unit type to hitbox attack, hitbox shape to a sphere with a radius of 1, then set your desired damage coefficient and increment, change the elemental type to pyro, and optionally add some VFX in on-hit performance. I chose red explosion dust. Then go back and click on Advanced Editing in on-hit detection. I chose non-repeating trigger in trigger type and set the detection delay time to 0.3. Add your newly created ability unit in on-hit trigger settings, and in the second tab again change the trigger area shape to a sphere with a radius of 1. You now have a fully working meteor. It's now time to create a skill you can use, so let's go back to the skill tab and add a new skill. This time, change the skill type from normal skill to hold skill. This allows us to use looping animations in the animation editor. Set your desired cooldown and usage limit, and once again let's go to Miliastra sandbox editor. Create another node graph in the same place as before, client node graph resource explorer and character skill node graph. This node graph is quite similar to the previous one, but instead of displacement, we will use execution node fixed point projectile launch, where projectile's prefab ID is the ID of the meteor projectile we just made. Create rotation in fixed point projectile launch is connected to rotate in get entity rotation and projectile function to function in query entity function. Where it gets more tricky again is the location of the projectile. If you want all your meteors to fall in the exact same spot, for example 10 meters ahead of your character, you can use the same method as the previously made dash skill. What this additional create 3D vector node does is it randomizes the fall location of each meteor from xz coordinates -5 -5 to 5 5. Keep in mind that the y component is not randomized, since we want all projectiles to fall from the same height. Also make sure the getRandomNumber node is set to floating point numbers by selecting the cog icon. Then we just add our randomized vector to our previous vector, and the calculation result is our location for the projectile. You can of course try tweaking these numbers. For example, if you want your meteors in a larger area, just change lower and upper limit in getRandomNumber nodes to -10 and 10 for example. Save your node graph, and finally let's head to animation editor. First, let's select our animations. I chose General Chant in Middle Precast, then in our loop animation slot, General Chant in Middle Loop Animation, and then at the default branch, General Chant in Middle Postcast. Normally, you can only shorten animations, but animations in the loop animation slot can be extended. So let's set our loop animation slot to 10 seconds. Then make sure our branch track transitions to default branch. This sends the animation to slot 3, postcast, after completion or interruption. Now of course we need to add our newly created node graph here, and since we want it to be a really powerful skill, we need to add a lot of meteors. Maybe you don't need as much as me, but you can't deny that looks really cool. After adding your projectiles, optionally add a VFX in the status track. I chose the Pyro Surround VFX. Then remember to equip your newly made skill to a class in the Player tab. My third example is a tri-elemental tornado skill that wreaks havoc in its path and continuously triggers many elemental reactions. Once again, we start in the local projectile tab, and this time we need to create 3 projectiles. Most of the configuration will be the same between them, the only differences will be the VFX and the element they apply. So let's begin with the Pyro Tornado projectile. The first tab is identical to the Meteor projectile. Select Empty Object, disable Native Collision, enable Permanent in Life Cycle settings, and optionally adjust the X, Z and Y component axis destruction distance. On the second tab, add Pyro Whirlwind as the VFX and set the projectile type to Linear Projectile with a speed of 3 on the Z axis. Then add an ability unit, set ability unit type to Hitbox Attack, hitbox shape to a cylinder with a radius of 1.2 and height of 5, and most importantly, set the elemental type to Pyro. Adjust the rest of the settings to your liking and choose Pyro Whirlwind Dissipates in the on-hit performance VFX. Then go back to on-hit detection and set trigger type to repeating trigger with an interval of 0.3 seconds and detection delay time of 0.1 seconds. This makes the tornado continuously deal damage to everything in its path. Add your ability unit under Execute Ability Unit when hit, and in the second tab set the on-hit area to a capsule with a radius of 1.2 and height of 5. Now create 2 another projectiles based on this one, Electro Tornado and Dendro Tornado. You can copy most of the settings by clicking on the 3 lines in the upper right corner of every module. Then remember to change VFX, Electro Whirlwind and Dendro Whirlwind, and on-hit performance VFX, Electro Whirlwind Dissipates and Dendro Whirlwind Dissipates. And most importantly, change the elemental type for your new tornadoes and leave the rest unchanged. When you're done, go back to Miliastra Sandbox Editor once again to create a node graph we can later insert into an animation. As a reminder, open Client Node Graph Resource Explorer, go to Character Skill Node Graph, then right-click on empty space and select Create Node Graph. We want to create the illusion that our 3 different projectiles form one tornado, so we need to land them all at once. We can do it by connecting Event Node Node Graph Starts to 3 different execution nodes fixed point projectile launch. You might wonder why this node graph needs an extra create 3D vector node like the previous ones, and the answer is simple. Without the 3 nodes you see at the top of the screen, the tornado would spawn directly on player. The added 003 components of the create 3D vector node simply make the tornado spawn 3 meters in front of the character casting the skill. The rest is just connecting rotate from get entity rotation to each create rotation pins and faction from query entity faction to projectile faction. After finishing, go back to the skill tab and add a new skill with normal skill type. Set your cooldown and usage limit and go to the animation editor. For this skill I chose 3 animations: General Chant in Place Precast, General Chant in Place Loop animation shortened to 0.3 seconds, and General Chant in Place Postcast shortened to 1.4 seconds and added our node graph in the middle section of the timeline. You can also optionally add some VFX by right-clicking on a status track. After you're done, you once again need to equip the skill to your class in the Player tab. I wanted to showcase that custom skills can also be used purely defensively, for example in form of a damage absorbing shield or barrier. My shield also makes players immune to interruptions. To create one, we need to start by going into Unit Status tab this time and click on plus new status. Set maximum stack layers to 1 and duration to 2 seconds, then go to the second tab. Click Add Effect and search for Interrupt Intake Multiplier and set its value to 0. This will make a character using the skill immune to all interruptions for 2 seconds. Then add another effect and in the special functions look for shield status. Then click on Shield Configuration and open Shield Management tool. This will open a new window where you can click on Add Shield and configure the settings of your shield. Elemental Damage Absorption type defaults to all, but you can make your shield effective only against some elements. Damage Taken Ratio slider controls the amount of damage the shield will block from previously mentioned elements. I set mine to 0.5, so my shield blocks 50% of all damage while it's in effect. Configure the rest of the settings to your liking, and remember to select your newly made shield in Shield Configuration. Now for the last time in this guide, let's head to Skill tab and add a new skill. After setting cooldown and usage limit for your skill, go to the Miliastra sandbox editor and create a new node graph in the same place as previous skills. I saved the easiest node graph for last. Connect node graph starts to execution node add unit status, get application target from query node get self entity, set the number of stacks to 1, and paste the unit status config ID. Then go back to the animation editor. I chose 2 animations for this one, activate and activate postcast, shortened to 1.4 seconds. Again, using the blue flag will help you insert the node graph at the appropriate location in the timeline, and remember to add some VFX this time, since the shield status is invisible by default. I chose 3 VFX: Pyro Shield, Geo Shield and Dendro Shield. And that's it. I hope you learned something about the skill module in Miliastra Wonderland and how to create custom skills for characters. If you're also interested in creating custom skills for monsters, please check out my other guide on this topic. Thank you for watching.